Hey everybody, this is Randy. You're tuned to VUC 508. Don't ask me how old I am, but we've done 508 of these suckers, and this is 508. I just wanted to mention a couple of really quick things. First of all, before we roll the music and thank all our sponsors, you remember Captain Crunch? John Draper is in a very, very sad state, and if you're able to, if you have the privileged position of having a few dollars to throw at this fellow, John was on the VUC a couple of years ago. I'm donating to this fund. This is, we won't get into things about health care, but John's in sad shape. He needs some money to continue and to get himself on his feet again. So go to vuc.li/helpcrunch. If you're willing to put a couple of bucks into his medical fund and help him get back on his feet. A few weeks ago, John was going to join us. Captain Crunch was going to join the VUC again for the second time, and he couldn't get in for various reasons. But point is, I just want to do this little quick commercial on that. And with that, I'm going to ask Michael to go ahead and roll our pre-roll thing, and then we'll get to our guest, who comes from Digium, and you may have heard of him, Matthew Jordan. Welcome to the bleeding edge of IP communications. This is the VUC. We're located at vuc.me. As usual, our thanks go out to Simwood.com. Simwood can turn any developer into a telco. Our hosted telephony is from onsip.com. Where would we be without zipdx.com for our wideband full-featured audio conferencing system? The VUC.me website is on bluehost.com. And our local rate dial-ins are from voxbone.com. Sounds like a .com revolution to me. So here's one more, tadsummit.com. For 2014, it's going to be in Istanbul. You should go check that out. For a 30% discount on registration, use FOVUC. Okay, cool, and thank you, Michael, for the pre-roll, as always, beautifully executed. We're going to introduce Mr. James Bodie, who's going to introduce Matt Jordan. But before that, I just want to mention one word. And let me turn my camera because I'm not comfortable with this angle. There we go. See this shirt? You can have one of these. But I digress. I just wanted to mention that I was looking through my records, and I noticed that in 2004, I had an invitation from IRC. Mark Spencer from Digium was going to be in Paris, where I lived at the time. And so I met Mark in 2004. I was able to get him to bring an ICSI, remember those, over for me, and I gave him the money for that. And Mark and I became friends, and I've known Mark for these 10 years, and I know his entire family, and we've gotten together several times at his folks' place, and I've had dinner with his folks even when Mark's not in town and so on. I just wanted to mention something. We have a history with Digium, and the history is very simple. A lot of the products that you're going to find today are actually started as forks from Asterisk. Asterisk was a huge deal at the time. Came out in, I think, 1999. Somebody nod, please. I think it was 1999. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, David. Thank you, James. And I became aware of it in 2003. But again, I just wanted to underline the fact we started as Asterisk Users Conference. The VUC started 7 years ago. We were called Asterisk Users Conference. And Mark Spencer was the only person in the world who thought this was a good idea besides me. I thought it was a great idea. Well, we've expanded because, you know, there's more to talk about besides Digium and Asterisk. But the fact is, folks, and I underline this and wanted to say it, and that's why I'm wasting your time before we talk to Matt and James, to say that seriously, at the time, Asterisk was a huge deal. It still is a huge deal. But a lot of the stuff you see out there today came from either people who knew about it and messed with it, and then they decided to fork it, or other type things like that. So the technology today has moved on, but you know, Digium and Asterisk are still a huge deal, and that's why I'm really pleased to welcome David Duffett, whose portrait I see, the handsome David Duffett, who has no chocolates today, but he's there. He's showing his side, his best side, and Matt Jordan. And before we go to Matt and possibly David, who knows, let's go to James Bodie, because James is going to tell us about Astricon, and then that will lead to Matthew Jordan.
Thank you, Randy. And here we are. Good evening, everybody, or good morning, live from London. I don't know why, but I've been nominated to say a little bit about some new bits at Astricon. First of all, we're going to be running a hackathon at Astricon. It's the first time this has been done, which will be extremely interesting. The hackathon is going to take place on the first formal. I was going to say it's going to take place on the first formal day, but it isn't. It's actually going to take place on the Wednesday. A few words about Astricon. Taking place on the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, the 21st to the 24th of October, which means it's just over 3 weeks away. The excitement is beginning to mount. The hackathon, you'll be able to enter when you get there. It's going to be free. And the challenge is to build something deep and meaningful out of Asterisk Respoke that we'll be hearing a bit more of later, and possibly Clarify, which also we'll hear more of later. The top 3 entries are then going to be given a chance to show their efforts off during the keynote presentation on the Thursday morning, with then prizes being awarded on Friday. So a really excellent thing to do on the Wednesday. David, as you're here, do you want to add to that? And it helps if you unmute yourself.
Still muted.
You are still muted.
Unmute.
Well, perhaps you don't.
I'm unmuted. I'm unmuted.
There you go.
Okay, sorry about that. Yes, yeah, it's what you said, James, but a slight modification, and that is, it looks like it might only be the top 2 people from the hackathon that get to present at Astricon during the keynote session, because time is very limited. So we're currently working out whether we can give 3 people 3 minutes or 2 people 5 minutes with hackathon ideas. But either way, those who are judged by their peers to have done the best job will get in front of the Astricon crowd on the Thursday morning, and then the prize for the best one, which will be voted by the Astricon crowd, will be awarded the next day on the Friday, because we've actually shifted through venue restrictions. We've shifted to a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday model rather than a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday model, which is what we usually go for.
So there are things going on the Tuesday, but they're not in the general Astricon schedule, are they?
No, the Tuesday is the Astra DevCon, so that's the developer group for just Asterisk itself, and then Tuesday night there is what was that? Oh, never mind. Tuesday night, there is a meet and greet prior to the hackathon. So there'll be a little session where people can hang out and get together and meet other people who are going to the hackathon, and form teams if you want to get on a team, which is probably a good idea. You can always go lone wolf, I think, but I think we recommend a team would be preferred. And then Wednesday's the hackathon.
Brilliant.
Yeah, indeed, just to fill in some details alongside the hackathon, that Wednesday that we lovingly refer to as the pre-con day also features a little distro track where there'll be sessions run by both the Elastics and the Free PBX people, and quite a few other things going on that day as well. So the hackathon is kind of one stream, if you like.
Brilliant. Okay, and then the other thing that I want to promote quite heavily are the good old dangerous demos, which will be taking place on the Friday afternoon. And this is a completely new format for dangerous demos at Astricon. This year we're going to have multiple prizes with proper prizes, glass crystal 3D holographic prizes, and there'll be a number of those in different categories. This is something we practiced at ClueCon earlier this year, and it was a huge success. And we're going to be posting a video with a kind of 2.5-minute summary of what went down at Dangerous Demos in Chicago. So people can have a look at that and think, do I really want to enter that? And we are honoured to have one of the multiple Dangerous Demo winners with us in the form of Emil, who is looking slightly less happy today than he was when he won it in Chicago. So that's about all from me. I've burbled on enough. Let's turn the mic across to Matt Jordan, who has a huge amount to tell us all about, and in fact, he's what everybody's here to listen to.
Just before Matt talks, of course, Matt himself is a Dangerous Demo participant in the Camelio World back in April.
Yeah. I was robbed.
Well, you came very close to winning a prize.
Well, that's what I get for trying to do live coding in the middle of it.
Okay, here's Matt.
Well, what was that?
I think that was applause.
Sounds like we've warmed up the audience, Matt.
Okay. So, just to reiterate everything James and David said, one of the things I think that is really cool about Astricon this year is that one of the big things we're focusing on is application development, telephony application development, obviously in particular, or communications application development. But that's one of the things that's been a big focus in Asterisk for the past 2 years in particular. We've had a really major focus on revamping the Asterisk core to facilitate the existing APIs and to allow us to go build new APIs, specifically with the goal of letting people outside of sort of what was probably traditionally called the Asterisk developer community to get at all of the cool things that are allowed inside Asterisk itself. A lot of times I think when people talk about the Asterisk developer community, there's this notion that you have to program in C, or it's only these 5 or 6 people, or well, there's more than that. There's actually about 100 people, but you have to do a patch in C to an existing dial plan application or those kinds of things. And that's still true. There's still a lot of people who actually like to do that work and do participate in that. But a big focus for the project has been to open Asterisk up to everybody, regardless of the development background, regardless of what languages they want to program in, and be able to make Asterisk much more of a generic communications engine rather than just a PBX that you drop in, or just a dialer, or just a call queue. Those things are great. They're not going anywhere. Asterisk is always going to be able to do those things, but we want the Asterisk to be able to be used just as an engine for communications as well. So I'm going to go switch over to some goofy slides here, and I'm going to try to keep the slides pretty brief, and so we can get into some more interesting conversations about things. Let's see how this works. Okay, so can everybody see the slides?
We're good.
Okay, cool. So, Asterisk APIs. Asterisk has traditionally offered 2 APIs, the Asterisk Manager Interface and the Asterisk Gateway Interface. The Asterisk Manager Interface really was mostly about call control. You can do other things through it. You can certainly look at the entire system using AMI, but if I had to sort of just summarize its purpose, I would say call control. While AGI was very much about dial plan execution, specifically remote dial plan execution, being able to access the dial plan applications in Asterisk through this nice little, something very similar to Apache CGI, and being able to execute dial plan applications through it. And together, you could use both of them together to do some very interesting things. With AGI, you can programmatically control the dial plan in Perl or PHP or Python or Ruby, and with AMI, you can sort of shuffle your channels around and get them to do things. but you have to usually use both of those APIs together, and sometimes where they touch, it's not always good. There can be some challenges with actually using both those APIs together, and you really are still constrained because you don't have access to the same kinds of primitives that a C application developer would actually have access to. You don't have access to the raw channel. You don't have access to the bridges and endpoints and device state and all these various things. You have to sort of get at them in sort of interesting ways. So a big goal in Asterisk 12 was to create a new API that let people do that. To really expose Asterisk just as a collection of communications primitives, and then let people go build things, build whatever they wanted using those primitives. And so ARI was sort of the result of that initial work done in Asterisk 12. And it really sort of fits in the middle between AMI and AGI. There are things that it can do that are certainly in the domain of AMI. There are things that it can do that are firmly in the domain of AGI, but it really solves that problem in the overlap. And the best way to try to explain it to somebody who's familiar with Asterisk is that you don't use ARI for controlling the existing voicemail dial plan application. You don't use ARI to try to put channels into the existing voicemail dial plan application. ARI is all about you want to write your own voicemail application. You want to build your own communications application and treat Asterisk just as a media engine server doing the back-end work for you. So what is ARI? It really consists of about 3 different parts. ARI, the most obvious part of ARI, is the actual RESTful interface. And I like to call it RESTful, even though the acronym stands for the Asterisk REST Interface, because we live in a non-clean world when we're dealing with communications. REST typically has this acronym, hypertext, as the engine of application state. And we're not that, because that essentially would mean that the ARI client itself would be the sole owner of everything that occurs within the system. Nothing can occur within the system without it being initiated by the ARI client. That doesn't really work when somebody hangs up a phone. If somebody hangs up a phone, things have to happen. You don't want the path of communication to stay up after somebody hangs up the phone. So we're RESTful. We get pretty close to there, but we acknowledge the fact that we live in an interactive world, and there are things that are going to happen that the ARI client is going to have to respond to. There's a lot of really cool resources, though, that we expose directly through ARI, and there tend to be fundamental primitives. So we expose channels, which if you're familiar with Asterisk, then you're very familiar with channels, but we also expose things like the actual bridges that channels happen to live in, and this is a first-class object. You can manipulate the bridge itself. You can play media specifically back to the bridge, as we'll kind of show you. You have control over endpoints and the state of the endpoints and the media that sits on the Asterisk server via the sounds resource. We have a sort of a funny little resource here called Asterisk, which gives you some very basic information, but could certainly be expanded onto in later versions where you could actually control the system more through that. And that starts to sort of bleed into that sort of AMI domain slightly. But you can see how the RESTful interface can start to expand beyond just what we've got there right now. But the core of it is really focused around building those communications applications. One of the nice things about RESTful APIs is that they tend to be fairly intuitive. So I've got this little string here, which would be a REST call that you could make, an HTTP call that you could make into Asterisk. And without explaining too much, you can kind of tell, oh, that's playing back TT monkeys on a channel. In the channels resource, I say which channel I want to go access, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I initiate a play operation, and I specify what media I want to play back on it. And that's kind of nice that it's a very familiar style to people who are building applications. The second part of the whole API is the stasis dial plan application. We had to have a way for Asterisk to hand channels in particular over to the external application wanting to control them. Asterisk likes to own things because that's its traditional model of doing things. It actually has, a dial plan, and it executes dial plan for you in dial plan logic. And AMI and AGI, that's really their sort of limitation, is they're constrained to what you have in the dial plan. There's a few exceptions where we've bent the rules, particularly in AMI with that, but generally you really are in the dial plan and manipulating the dial plan. On the other hand, if you're building your own communications application, you want to have a lower level of access than that. And so we have to have a way for Asterisk to acknowledge, okay, this channel I'm handing it completely over to this external application, and I don't own it anymore. It's up to you to go do things to it, and to really segment out that logic. And that's the stasis dial plan application. That's what actually does that action of handing the channel over to the connected ARI client. There's two little brief examples here. And one of the nice things about dial plan and Asterisk is you can make this as all-encompassing as you want. I could have an extension that just is my dial plan application. You could view that stasis dial plan application as calling Q or voicemail or something else, and have it be very integrated into the existing Asterisk ecosystem. Or you can throw caution to the wind, throw away your entire dial plan, have a general catch-all, and dump everything into stasis and hand everything off to an external application. And then you have one line in your dial plan for your entire server, and you're done, and you walk away. So it's a very flexible model because you can, bite off just as much of this API as you really want to, and then expand it further if you really feel like it. The last piece of this, and this is probably the trickiest part for people to kind of understand, is that ARI applications are asynchronous. One of the biggest limiting factors with AGI is that it is a synchronous API, and so when you in your AGI call voicemail, you're blocked until the channel comes out of voicemail. And if you wanted to intercept DTMF or you wanted to manipulate the channel in some fashion, you can't unless you multi-thread your application, and then you get into a whole big mess of stuff. So ARI clients are asynchronous. When you actually tell Asterisk to play back media on a channel or do something like that, it is an asynchronous operation, and it returns. How you know what's going on is you have to provide a WebSocket connection back to Asterisk. And that WebSocket connection has two different special purposes. The first is, over that WebSocket, we spill back JSON events about what's occurring in your actual stasis application. And that's how we inform you, okay, you have channels that entered into your stasis application. That channel, had a DTMF that occurred. Somebody talked on it, because we have talk detection, and so you can get notified that, oh, somebody's talking and they stopped talking. And that also keeps you from hurting yourself too much, because you don't want channels to get handed off to an external application and have no external application sitting there able to handle them. That would leave a whole bunch of stuck channels on your system and memory and all the other kinds of things that happen. So we require a WebSocket connection back so that you can actually service the things that have been handed off to you. One of the nice things about stasis applications is that, unlike AMI, it has a very well-defined subscription model. So you don't get the entire state of the world unless you subscribe for it. That means one of the things we found with very complex systems, particularly ones that make heavy use of AMI, is that the bottleneck actually was on the client side, because the client was having to do so much work building out the state of the world. With ARI applications, you get as much of the state of the world as you choose to subscribe for. That last point is something that actually, the well-defined lifetime is something that applies to Asterisk 12 and later. We've spent a lot of effort and energy improving the core of Asterisk so that channels have a very predictable lifetime. They have channels, as they enter and leave bridges, have very predictable events notifying you when they're in a bridge and when they're not. And everything has a good, strong model for how things behave when they're doing things in Asterisk. Makes it far easier to build applications on Asterisk than you ever could before. So, although ARI is a RESTful interface, I think once you have a REST API, the first thing people do is wrap that up in some very thin facades in their various languages of their choice. These examples are Python. I like Python. I happen to do a lot of Python coding, but we also have people who are doing things in Node.js, and we have some people who are doing things in C# and Java and PHP, and there's all sorts of cool language development stuff going on right now. But this is how easy it can be to actually make an ARI application. If I wanted to make a mixing bridge for the VUC to build my own VUC conference, I just tell my ARI client to make me a bridge. If I had a channel in my stasis application, I just add the channel to the bridge. I can play some media on the channel by telling it to play back, and one of the nice things is that I can play the media directly to the bridge too, and that plays it to all the participants in the mixing bridge. So if I wanted announcements, I don't have to do anything weird like make a local channel and send it off to the dial plan, which hits this other thing. I can just tell it to play media directly into the bridge. Just a quick plug for the community at this point. There's a large number of libraries that are getting worked on by various community members. Lens from Qmetrics did ARI for Java. I think Snuffy, Bradley Watkins did astronet.ari. I hope I'm right on that. And yes, Snuffy. ARI Pi and Node ARI Client were written by some developers here at Digium. Near is working on PHP ARI right now, and somebody on Reddit posted a Ruby library, so that's going on. Although I took a look at the Ruby library and I put some asterisks there because it's still heavily under development and needs a little bit of work because it actually doesn't have a WebSocket yet, so it won't really do much. We've got a lot of good documentation on wiki.asterisk.org, including samples and walkthroughs starting from the very basics of building ARI applications. We've got a fair number of ARI examples up on GitHub. And Sam, a developer here at Digium, is currently working on a sample voicemail replacement application written in JavaScript for Node.js. And so there's a whole host of repos he has on GitHub for various components that are building into that. And the goal there is that that is a serious application, that it is not just an example, but it's something that you could take, download, install using NPM, and get it up and running and have a basic voicemail system to start building on top of. One of the things we found is that a lot of people, when they have APIs, is they have very simple examples of, you know, here's how you draw a stick figure, and then the next picture is the Mona Lisa. And we're trying to give something that's an intermediate stepping point so that you can see, oh, this is how I would go structure out a good ARI application and go build something substantial with it. So on that note, if you have a SIP client, and we actually have it currently running. There is a Prisoner's Dilemma conference bridge written in ARI currently up and running. If you jump over to neutron.jcnlabs-labs.net, that's Joshua Culp's Asterisk server. You can register on there as any account, and then if you dial VUC at neutron.jcn-labs.net, you'll get dropped into it. With that, I'll kill the slides, or I'll at least... ARI for all the things, exactly. Yes, that is our goal. So one of the things you'll note about that is, oh, there we go. There's the VUC. So one of the things that's kind of interesting is you'll note that there's this little VUC asterisk bot that's hanging out in the channel. And whenever anybody joins the ARI conference bridge, it actually will grab their channel and their IP address and do a geo lookup through another API. So there you go. So somebody from the City of London just joined our Prisoner's Dilemma conference. And so this is one of the really cool things about writing applications using ARI is that it's very easy to mash APIs together and to make things work together. It also, as you can tell, it has an IRC bot that it's tied into. So there's, in the same Python file, there's an IRC bot. So we're using that API. We're using an API for geolocation stuff, and then we're using ARI to tie all this stuff together. One of the things that's kind of funny, so I did say this was a Prisoner's Dilemma conference bridge. Oh, and they just left. If you're in the conference and you hit your DTMF key of 0, it will randomly grab any channel in the conference and play howler monkeys to them. And somebody got howler monkeys.
Yeah, I confirm I have howler monkeys.
So because this is unified communications, though, anybody in the VUC, in hashtag VUC, in pound VUC can actually play along. If you send an IM to VUC asterisk underbar bot with the word monkey in it, it will do it to a random participant as well. And everybody's getting monkeys now. Yeah, Randy, you actually have to IM it directly. It'll well, that might work. I don't know.
I just realized.
This actually also has outbound calling technically in it as well, but I'm a little hesitant to try that because we could try actually if you want to drag somebody into this conference. If you let me see, does anybody have a SIP URI we could dial real quick?
Yeah, Zeek at vuc.me. Z-E-E-E-K, 3 E's.
All right, hold on. 3 E's, Zeek at vuc.me.
Yep.
All right, let's try this out. This is dangerous because we haven't tried this.
Got to have dangerous. Got to have dangerous.
Yeah, we have been known to do the odd.
Nope, didn't work. Oh well.
Talking about dangerous, Ben Klang's just appeared on.
The Bens are both here. The two Bens.
There they are. Yeah.
So, so much for the outbound dial. That part didn't work. So that is, I suppose, the dangerous part of the demo. One thing you can see if I flip over to my little console here, I've got some. I apparently have something malformed in there. So there's nothing like the present to watch Python exceptions go flying by. But what's kind of fun is I actually wrote myself a little CLI here, so I can see who all's hanging out, and then we'll look at some code. Why not? So the monkey time here that plays the monkeys. Let's zoom in a little bit. So to actually play monkeys on a channel, I pick a random channel, remove him from the conference bridge temporarily, and then initiate a playback on him, and I'm telling him to play TT Monkeys. But because this is asynchronous, the operation doesn't wait till the sound file to complete, because synchronous operations are the devil. They're bad in the world of communications. So I subscribe for when the playback is going to be finished on that operation. And then you can see it calls this little Python unmonkeys done here. And when the monkeys have finished being played back on the channel, it just drops them right back into the conference. Let's find something like this kind of fun.
Who's bringing the echo back?
We're bringing echo back. So, same sort of thing here. And I hope it's not me. When the channel actually goes into the conference, this is the little handler for when a channel gets entered, you can see that we initiate a playback of you're going to be placed into the conference. We subscribe for when that operation is going to be done, and we tell it to notify the conference when that happens. And then we go ahead and just answer the channel because we need to actually get them all answered up. When the notification is played, I think somebody probably had their conference on.
So it looks like it's coming from Michael according to Hangouts. So presumably it's the yeah. There we go. Is it DX?
There we go.
No.
Okay.
Still there. Yeah. So presumably it's the DX end of the world.
Okay. Well, I'll continue and hope that the echo will go away. So when you get notified of the playback being finished there, it actually drops you then into the conference, tracks the channels a little bit, and then sends a message out to IRC, and then plays a beep into the actual bridge itself. So again, we can do media operations directly on the conference bridge. You know, one of the fun things about this is most of this was written in an hour on my couch at home when I realized I was going to be doing the VUC, and I wanted something kind of fun to show. It didn't take a substantial amount of time to go put this mini conference bridge application together. Doing something similar to this where you have this sort of custom logic of grabbing random channels out and playing media and customizing which sounds get played. Doing that by tweaking a bunch of levers in a dial plan application that already exists would be really challenging. And so the ability to kind of get at that fundamental stuff that makes up Asterisk and then play around with it and do kind of fun things, it's really a very powerful concept, and it allows you to really customize the applications that you use Asterisk for. And with that, I'll say my spiel is done, and I will stop the screen share.
Which means we should maybe start asking if anybody has any questions or comments. And we have some pretty illustrious folks on, even though David didn't bring his chocolates. But Tim looks like he's unmuted. He may ask.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think it looks great. This is the kind of thing that Asterisk has needed for, so long. I mean, I remember Jay Phillips giving a rant about this, exactly this. This kind of feature being needed, and we're talking, what, 5 years ago? And at the time it wasn't obvious what that would be or what it would look like, but just kind of the aspiration to be able to do this kind of thing. And so it's great to see that it's been done, and that you've, instead of trying to kludge it on in a corner, you've actually gone through and, as you say, tried to make all of the 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 behavior is predictable and that kind of stuff. I think that's fantastic. I'm looking forward to an opportunity to play with it ideally in some kind of bizarre language. I'm going to pick pick something like Scala or I don't know.
Well, so if on that note, David Lee, who did a lot of the work on ARI, is a Scala fan. So I mean, it certainly would probably lend itself to that. I kind of keep going back, and I don't want to like drag WebRTC into this because this is not a WebRTC thing. One of the exciting points about WebRTC to me, though, is the fact that you can get at communications using JavaScript, and you don't have to have some C developer, or you don't have to be an expert in memory management and all these kinds of things. And it's not that communications is still easy, but it opens up a world of doing things much simpler. So when I wrote this application, as I said, this is running off of Josh's server in San Diego. I have never logged on to that Asterisk server. He just told me, hey, connect the WebSocket with these credentials. This is your extension that you can dial with a SIP phone into it. And the rest of it, I never touched Asterisk, never looked at it, never saw how it was configured. The amount of Asterisk configuration to actually enable all of this was all of probably adding 3 lines of dial plan at most. So it's not that you don't have to know Asterisk to write applications like this. It's not that you don't have to know communications, but it is certainly much more approachable than having to learn dial plan extension language and then track multiple APIs and redirect channels around and do all this kind of finagling that you would traditionally have to do in order to build an application like that. You can take somebody who knows JavaScript or knows Python or knows Ruby and point them at it with minimal effort and get them up and running and get them building things.
I think my experience with this kind of thing, it is even more the fact that it is as mashable as it is means that you can try a few things. So the sort of classic way that these things get built is somebody has a weekend, and as you say, they sit on a couch and they hack something together that it does something interesting, and they tweak it a bit until it does something a little bit better, and then they show it to their boss on Monday morning, and they say, oh, well, actually that's really useful. Why don't we put it into production? And it just but the fact that you can get something sensible done in an experimental way is I think the really quantitatively different thing. I mean, anytime I've tried to build something in C for changing a dial plan app, I've had to sit down and plan out really carefully what it is that it's going to do, how it's going to do it, where it's going to get the resources from, how it's going to release them, and all of those things, and carefully plan what it is I'm going to do. So I have to know in advance what the goal is, whereas with this kind of thing, you can just kind of have a rough idea and mess with it, and then say, hey, actually, this is interesting, and then tweak it some more, and then wrap it up. And okay, you still need to be reasonably professional about, like, does it do what it's supposed to? But it just gives you that. Well, I mean, even the idea of running a hackathon, right? So the idea of running a hackathon in writing a dial plan app wouldn't even, like, you'd need a month rather than a day. And so that just tells you that this is heading in the right direction for an awful lot of people. Anyway, rant over. I think it's brilliant.
That's exactly the reaction we were hoping for. We've got a number. I don't want to say that this is it, right? Because this is, I would say, the right amount of functionality for the first long-term support release that actually is going to support this API. So Asterisk 12 is a standard release, and Asterisk lingo, that means it's a year of bug fixing, it's a year of security fixing. Standard releases are when we do our major architectural work. It's where we do the kinds of things that we're trying out new stuff in the project. Long-term support releases are 4 years of bug fix and a year of security fix. So it's really the goal for an LTS is that you have something that's production ready. And I think ARI is there. You can build really cool applications using ARI today. We know people who are, actually. We know some people who have actually built some interesting applications, and if you go to the Asterisk App Dev mailing list, you'll actually see some people talking about the applications they're building. Certainly know there's an outbound predictive dialer already built using ARI, so that'll be very fun and interesting. And it's performing very well, which is nice to see, too. One of the handy parts about exposing the sort of low-level primitives is you can optimize some things that you couldn't quite optimize before because you were sitting in the PBX core and you couldn't do certain stuff. So there's some opportunities there that we've been able to take in Asterisk itself to leverage some cool things. But it's not done. It's not like this is a rubber stamp of finality and, you know, ARI, we're done, hands off, right? So there's a lot of really good things that people like Ben Langfeld and Ben Klang have asked for and been talking about that we would love to get to, that I plan on getting to, that we're going to be talking more about at AstroDevCon. There's some obvious sorts of things that would be really fun and cool. So, for example, we have talk detection now through ARI, so you can attach a little talk detection hook to a channel and get events about when people are talking or not talking. But that gets very quickly into sort of the very fun things to do with Asterisk of speech detection and text-to-speech, and those things aren't quite exposed yet through ARI. We've looked at the problem, and it's not very hard. It just, we sort of ran out of time, and we didn't want to shoehorn things into a long-term support release that didn't go through enough testing and enough development. So there's going to be more enhancements to the API. There's going to be more things that you can do in it that we're going to be adding in 14. And so there's a lot of really fun things to actually talk about at Astricon this year, at AstroDevCon in particular. But I'm also really excited to see what people try to do with this at the hackathon, because, you know, I come from the in the trenches Asterisk world, and, you know, that's not a bad thing. It's good because that's what I do, but at the same time, you know, you don't really start to see what people are thinking about and what they actually need in an API until I think you get people using it in sort of those more creative settings. And it's like you said, it's the mashups where, oh, hey, if I just had this, then I could have tied this API into it and I could have done these things. And that's going to really help drive, I think, the direction of where the API goes in the future.
Hello.
Anybody else have questions?
You know, I just woke up to the fact that Carl Fife is not with us for some reason. He's not in ZipDX. So somebody's going to have to take over and channel Carl, if you would.
No long-winded questions.
I think I'm too English to do that.
The audio to ZipDX was lost for a minute or two, but I managed to bring it back.
I'm very sorry. Because there was some horrible echo coming in. I don't know where that was coming from. Anyway, anybody else? We have so many different sources. Please chime in if you...
So, I mean, I can talk about more things if there's no questions.
We'd love to hear you talk.
Yeah, could you just give us a 2-minute rundown or a bit of a sneak peek into some of the wonderful things that are just over the horizon in Asterisk 13?
Okay. So a few of the different things that have gone on, you know, a lot of these things were developed during the Asterisk 12 timeframe, but there are some things that in particular that we've been focusing on specifically for 13, and we wanted to make sure got out in that release. So I'd say 3 big ones, just because, again, the focus for 13 is always as an LTS, as a stable platform. So these aren't going to be the same kinds of earth-shattering things that you would have seen in the Asterisk 12 release where we ripped the guts out of the core and did all these crazy things, which is good because we had to actually go make sure that it was ready to be an LTS. So 3 things. On SIP side, so totally unrelated to ARI, we do have a whole new SIP stack using PJSIP. So 2 new features that made it into the PJSIP stack that are pretty interesting. The first is we added support for resource list server. So you actually can do resource list subscriptions with phones, which is always nice for your bandwidth kinds of problems, because instead of having to subscribe to 40 different contacts in order to get their presence, you can just subscribe to a single list and get all of the notifications in a nice batch sort of format, and does batching of notifications and all those kinds of things, which is really, really handy for office environments where everybody wants to subscribe to the presence of everybody else and have all of their blinky lights constantly flashing. For people who are doing sort of larger scale Asterisk deployments, we started to look at some of what I would call the clustering and scalability problem. I don't think it's not like we went off into the deep end of going super crazy on that yet, but that is certainly will be an interesting topic for AstroDevCon. But one of the really cool things that we did get in was the ability for Asterisk using SIP to share device state and MWI between Asterisk servers. So that functionality has always existed, well, not always, it's existed in Asterisk for quite some time using Jabber, using an XMPP server, or using CoreSync in order to share state back and forth between Asterisk servers. But now you can just, with straight up SIP, it'll actually do a SIP publish request to other Asterisk instances with changes in device state, changes in MWI, and the Asterisk core has been tweaked up a little bit as well to be able to really natively understand when its core primitive objects have been updated by an external system versus itself, and so it can take those states and aggregate them accordingly. So you can take multiple Asterisk servers and using SIP without setting up anything else, just use SIP and share state between Asterisk servers in a clustered environment, which is pretty cool. Lastly, in ARI, one of the big things that we got in 4.13 is actually the ability to tie in out-of-call messages directly into ARI. So if you have XMPP clients, because Asterisk can act as an XMPP client, and if you tie into an XMPP server, you can, directly through ARI, send messages, XMPP messages, to your XMPP server. You can have text messages sent from your XMPP server or through SIP, and it'll show up as a text message in ARI, and it'll actually get sent as a JSON event to you. So you can actually use Asterisk straight up as a SIP to XMPP back-to-back user agent for text messages if you really wanted to. That would be a very interesting use for ARI, since we're usually much more on the media plane of things, but it actually will do text message integration with SIP and XMPP as well.
Brilliant.
So that is a very fast spiel through three things.
Yeah, and something we haven't really mentioned, or we kind of mentioned it in the introduction a little bit, is respoke. How do you pronounce it?
I pronounce it respoke. I think it's pronounced respoke. I have gotten into the habit of saying respoke. But we need Russell Bryant or somebody to pronounce it for us officially, because that's probably an inside joke. He had a recording of himself pronouncing Dottie, and that's how we all knew how to pronounce it instead of Daddy or, Dottie, or it was just Russell Bryant with one word just saying Dottie. We might need to get that for Respoke at some point.
That sounds like the sort of thing that should go into Core Sounds.
It should, yeah. It's pronounced this, everybody.
I think we're talking about doing a separate session of that between now and Doomsday. So we'll organize it.
Yeah, we'll definitely get that. We'll get the guys on here from the Respoke team on here. I'm not on that team. I certainly have had something to do with it, but just more on the periphery. Looks like it's going to be a very cool service. I think it'll be a very interesting offering. I don't want to talk too much about it myself, simply because I will dig them into a hole very quickly, probably, of promising things that I shouldn't promise. But we'll definitely get Billy or one of the other guys on here to talk more about it.
Speaking of other topics, let me take advantage of your presence here, Matt, and also David. If there are any questions on IRC, type them in, or on ZipDX, hit *6 unmute yourself and ask your question. So we can talk very briefly about, well, one actually, but these folks don't have that much time.
Well, while we're waiting, Randy, I just noticed Dan Jenkins just joined on IRC. And in fact, Dan is one of a pair with Tim Panton at Astricon this year. So maybe Tim could give just a little outline about what he and Dan will be doing there.
Oh, right, yeah. Okay. So Dan and I are going to try and talk about the practicalities of WebRTC in the sense of, how many, if you run Opus through your Asterisk, how many CPUs are you going to need to run X channels? What does it look like in terms of the bandwidth? The sort of pragmatic stuff of going beyond using it as an experiment, but actually trying to work out, what does it do to my little Asterisk box that's been happily running, 20 G729 channels for a decade, and now suddenly I want to push video through it. Like, does this work? Do I need to put it in the same place? And so we're going to talk about kind of deployment options and try and show what sort of what sort of hit that your box will take, and some things will work and some things won't, is basically the conclusion. And we want to try and give you a sense of which of those things will work. And we're not really going to do it as a kind of, we're going to try and avoid being technology specific, so we don't want to talk about, oh well, if you use this JavaScript library, or if you're doing, you know, blah de blah, this particular detail thing. We want to be much more generic about, well, here are the standards, you know, they run, here are the codecs that are possible, here's the possible bandwidth settings you can have on Chrome and Firefox, and, you know, this is what you might do, and here are some network architectures you might want to think about. You know, are your users, your WebRTC users, are they inside? Are they internal on the same LAN? Are they outside around the world, distributed? What kind of networks are they behind? You know, so trying to sort of talk through a set of questions that people actually actively trying to deploy WebRTC solutions are going to have to think about, and, you know, using Asterisk obviously is the vehicle to illustrate them, and hopefully, if Dan and I get our act together with some real life statistics from an Asterisk box that's sitting behind me here, and I have yet to, I have it doing stuff, and Dan has some statistics stuff, but we haven't glued them together yet. So hopefully by then graphs will happen, but who knows?
Hey Tim, what stats do you need?
Little graphs of, you know, incoming channels versus CPU load and that sort of stuff.
So funny little thing. In Asterisk 12 and later, we actually have a stats-D module. And it has a very basic channel stats-D module currently that I think will spit out to a stats-D server the current number of channels. But it's super easy to, like, add more stats. So if you're using stats-D and you need some stats from what's going on in the system, we could probably whip that together pretty quickly.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm going to talk to Dan and see what he's already got, because he built. I mean, I don't know if you saw his talk last year, but he built some stuff around this already. So I'm kind of, and he does pretty nice graphs, whereas mine are kind of, you know, mine tends to be in a monospace font and, you know, black and white. So I thought hopefully between us we can actually come up with something that looks decent. But that's the aspiration for this talk, is really just, you know, beyond an experiment, what are you going to have to do to provision something given a particular network config for WebRTC?
Right. Top class, and actually Tim and Dan are one of only 3 interesting pairings this year at Astricon. Another notable pairing is Ben Klang, who we all know, and the lovely Alison will be delivering a session together which strays into the world of speech technology and artificial intelligence. So there's something to look forward to. And another pairing will be the man on the screen there, Matt Jordan, with Sam. Matt, can you quickly mention that session, and also pronounce Sam's surname?
Sam may walk over to my office and smack me when I get it wrong here. Sam Galarno, French Canadian by heritage, but American here for quite a while. Dual citizen, actually. So Sam and I are going to be talking about building rich communications applications with Asterisk, specifically, obviously, ARI. So it'll be one of the things that Sam has been working on, as I mentioned, was that Node.js voicemail application, and so we'll be talking a bit about that, about, you know, what it's like to actually build a serious application using the API, the kinds of things you would run into, the kinds of things you want to be aware of, and really kind of go deep into ARI and how you can manipulate, how you can build your own communications application using it.
Great, okay, and another man in a little mini screen down below, young James Bodie from TruePhone. TruePhone are also represented twice on the Astricon schedule. Not only the dangerous demos, but one of your guys is going to speak as well, isn't he, James?
Indeed, yeah, the indomitable sardine, Mr. Giacomo Vacca, is going to be sharing some of his encyclopedic knowledge on how to deploy big globs of Asterisk using all kinds of interesting tools.
Yes, he's got Camelio and Puppet in his description as well, so that'll be great. And we've actually got a good collection of Asterisk stroke Camelio talks and a good number of Asterisk stroke Open SIPs talks coming along as well, with both Daniel and Bogdan being on the speakers list. I'm just seeing if there's... Oh yeah, here's an interesting one. A guy called
David.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. This year, have you got any interesting embedded talks? Remember we had Ward Monday last year. That went down reasonably well. Anybody coming doing interesting things with embedded Asterisk, or things that you plug into Asterisk boxes even?
Well, there's a good question. Looking at the list of talks we've got, none spring out with the word embedded in the kind of headline details. So I'd have to tell people to go to astricon.net and look at the full schedule and see if they can find such a one. Unfortunately, Ward's not...
That's a really good idea, yeah. Astricon.net, did you say?
That's right, astricon.net. There's a full schedule page. And unfortunately, we've not got Ward with us this year. He says he's done too much travelling and he's not going to make the trip all the way over to Vegas. But in a little side notice, Mark Spencer and I will be flying over to Ward's house in November to say hello to him, just to keep that community love going.
Okay, well, I have an inkling that even though he may not physically be in Las Vegas, he might put in the odd appearance or two.
Is this the new Asterisk-based teleport system that you and me have been working on?
Yeah, it could be, but I suspect he will make the odd appearance, and we can do that because we're magicians, aren't we?
Yes, Asterisk.
Powerful wizards of Asterisk.
Yes, just going back on the historical line that Randy was talking about. I myself remember going to Randy's apartment back in 2006 with Mark Spencer and having a fun time on a live VUC. And another historical figure is, of course, Jim Dude Dixon. And Dude will be making a welcome return to Astricon this year. He's going to be coming along and giving a little bit of a historical talk, because although it's great looking forward, last year proved that people were quite interested in hearing stories from the past from people like Mark Spencer and Philippe from Free PBX and such. And so Dude's going to be on hand to talk a little bit about how he got going with the Tormentor cards and that kind of stuff, and doubtless throw a few opinions around the room about where he thinks things are going too.
Zapata.
Yes, Zapata, viva the revolution, Randy.
I again wish to call for any IRC, which we are all have our eyes riveted on IRC. There's a little bit going on right now. If you have a question or comment, please don't hesitate to type it into IRC. But also, if you're on ZipDX, there are lots of people on ZipDX. Hit *6 and shout it out. We'll have a moment of silence here. Not a moment, really, but a couple of seconds. I'm talking here to cover the time it takes to hit.
There's quite an important question from Quarks on IRC. I don't know whether you saw that, about whether larger folk take up more bandwidth on video.
Yeah, that's
Boy, just be very careful.
Well, I'm not going to answer it. I was just highlighting the question, but it's nice to hear from Quarks then.
So I was going to ask Matt actually a question, which it's not really. It is fair. I was looking at the news of the week with the shell shock vulnerability.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, I wonder if there are any niches in Asterisk which follow this, which would be exposed. Unfortunately, I haven't managed to find any yet. I mean, and none natively in Asterisk. I was thinking, maybe there were some environment variables like caller ID got set here and there, but it looks like that's not the case.
I think we're probably okay. We don't do too much environment variable reading unless it's on startup, and there might be some things from the Asterisk. Nothing's ringing a bell, because we were thinking through that kind of thing as well. Clearly, there's environment variables that get read by the safe asterisk script, that gets delivered with Asterisk. So there, I suppose you could do something there, but that's a bash script already anyways, and so if you're reading environment variables out of a bash script, you're kind of
already vulnerable as you go.
Yeah, you're already there, right?
Yeah,
the enemy is within the gates. I think the thing to be worried about is probably where I usually get concerned with Asterisk in the first place, which is people who use like the system dial plan application or the shell function or things to farm out to bash scripts from their Asterisk server. That's the kind of...
Oh, there's an interesting question. So things like voicemail, email backends, those kinds of things would be, those would be the kinds of places to look for that, I guess.
Asterisk itself shouldn't get compromised because whenever it actually does those kinds of things, it always forks the process. But, it's always one of those scary things when you have from your dial plan, I'm going to go launch a bash script process and pass it things that I may or may not have sanitized properly. That's usually where I kind of get a little worried where, well, okay, if you do things correctly, you're fine, right? But that's always the case with stuff. So it's a powerful tool, but it's it's one that can be easily compromised if you're not careful. So people who are using those things should probably go double check that they're not allowing things through or not making bad assumptions about the scripts that are being executed.
I think that the vector I was sort of idly speculating about would be, if you manage to freak your caller ID to include the magic letters or symbols, and then that's then somehow gets used as an environment variable somewhere.
But people do that kind of crazy thing, right? So they will pass their raw caller ID out as a parameter to a bash script, or so. I don't know why you would set an environment variable if you did that. But,
right. That's the question, I guess.
I'm always in a state of I'll say interested surprise by some of the dial plans I see that come across mailing list posts and other things. So I never know exactly how people are going to do things. I find my powers of prediction for end user usage is constantly wrong.
They're very diplomatic of you.
Okay, if I can.
That's interesting.
Just for a second to say that we've got Matt Jordan here and David Duffett on Astricon. And everybody else, James Bodie from TruePhone, Michael, everybody, Tim Patton. Does anybody have any further questions? Otherwise, we'll close it down. But we're watching IRC, and we're listening on hit *6 on ZipDX. And otherwise, we can...
Well, in case there aren't any other questions, I guess I would also like to ask one. So in the Jitsi community, we've been spending a lot of time on Jitsi Meet, and one of the problems that we've been trying to solve is connect to traditional SIP infrastructures, be able to join regular SIP phones into a WebRTC video conference. And we have this component that we've built, a SIP gateway that has to connect to an Asterisk and do the mixing so that it would send audio to Asterisk in a shape that it generally handles it in, basically one audio mixed stream. But we were thinking if we could optimize that, and we would actually love it if Asterisk could join directly a conference, take multiple audio streams, and then send those to, I don't know, to other regular SIP devices or something like that. So I was wondering what the how would that fit with the new Asterisk architecture and the whole redesign of the media stack? Would that be something doable?
I'm glad you asked. Yes. So the the nice thing about the new architecture is that bridges are a first-class citizen, and so how we bridge. And the bridging architecture is still one of the more complex areas of Asterisk, but it's very, very flexible and adaptable to different kinds of things. And so how we mix media can be changed on the fly within an existing bridge. And this is kind of tangentially related to your question, so I'm going to circle around. So for example, when you make a mixing bridge through ARI, it just says, okay, you want me to mix the media, but it doesn't actually define how the media is mixed. And then based on as the participants join the bridge, it picks as the most efficient way of mixing that media. So you can start off in a native RTP bridge with direct media if you only have 2 participants, and then when a third channel joins, it goes, oh, I've got 3 participants, and I need to go into a soft mix kind of situation and pulls all the media back in and starts mixing it appropriately. And you don't have to make new bridges for that or anything. So from a Jitsi Meet perspective, the limitation then really becomes the actual RTP implementation in Asterisk. That's, I think, where you're probably running into your problem, because the RTP implementation in Asterisk does not assume, oh, I've got a single stream of RTP coming into me, but it's actually 5 or 6 or a dozen media sources. It just assumes that it's one media source, and so every 60 milliseconds or so, it's going to be taking the next RTP UDP packet that it received, turning it into a frame, and tossing it up to the actual bridging core. When in reality, what you want is that to be, 12 or a dozen frames or whatever it is from all the different participants that came over during the stream at that point in time. So it's really more of an RTP implementation problem that we currently have. I think that's one of the biggest places to go focus in Asterisk 14 as one of the candidate things to go deal with, is to go revisit the RTP implementation and to go take a look at the media stack in Asterisk. It's certainly going to be one of the things I'll bring up at DevCon, and I think that if we solve that problem, then it's probably smooth sailing for Jitsi at that point.
It does sound like that, and that would be really something awesome to have. So thanks very much for your answer.
No problem.
And of course, I'm tempted to get a room on Jitsi. And with that, because they call it rooms. All right, never mind. That was a joke. Inside basement.
We need a red flag, Randy, so we know.
That's. If anybody else has any other questions, I'm always. We're about the final, the auction here for questions. No Carl Fife. Very disappointed.
Yeah, I've got a quick one for David. What's happening about the Astricon party this year?
One.
So we're not going to have hula hoops, are we?
No, there's another thing that's changed. There's been a few changes going around. So originally we thought, with it being Vegas and people liking to get up on the main strip in Vegas, that we would actually, rather than do a full-on party, we would do like a pre-party warm-up, give people access to free alcohol, and then set them free in Vegas. However, I learn now that Tim, you were looking forward to that part as well, weren't you?
No, I was thinking you could wipe the whole community out like that.
But as it is, I now learn that there will be 2 events, but still keeping that theme of giving people time to get up on the strip in groups that they choose themselves if they'd like to. On the Thursday night, we will be having an Elvis and Rat Pack do of some kind. So it's sounding like drinks and Elvis to me. And then on the Friday, even more convivially, there's going to be a barbecue right after Matt's roadmap session. So when Matt's just talking about what's coming down the line and what's been occurring, we will then decant to a poolside barbecue after that.
You won't be grilling me, will you? Da-da-da.
You need to hold that flag up as well.
Yeah, I do.
Yes. So no hula hoops, James, but there will be some kind of Elvis type entertainment, it seems.
Jolly good.
All right, that sounds good. We're going to go over to the mature audiences section, and in the meantime, here's a little shout out to the sponsors. Thanks to everybody. Thank you, Matt. It's always a great pleasure to have you.
Good to be here.
Thank you, David, and I missed your chocolate and mustaches for Las Vegas, but I really don't. Thank you. And I'll especially a big shout out to Allison. Gosh, Allison, I wish I could see you. Okay.
Isn't it time that Alison got back on VUC again, Randy?
Yeah, she'll be back soon. She'll be back soon. In fact, here's Alison right now.
Look to the skies. Keep watching the skies.
Hey, that was the bleeding edge of the IP communications and VoIP community. We're at vuc.me on the web. Thanks to simwood.com, who can turn you as a developer into a telco. Our hosted PBX is provided by onsip.com. The site at vuc.me is on bluehost.com. We use zipdx.com for our wideband, full-featured conference bridge. And our local rate dial-ins are from voxbone.com. Every Friday, 12 noon Eastern Time. See you next week.